Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of the Infrastructure Committee to hear submissions to the review of the speed control bylaw. I'd like to welcome councillors. It's going to be a pretty straightforward sort of meeting as per the agenda. I haven't been told of any apologies this morning, so there's a few that haven't arrived yet, but I have no apologies. Confirmation of the order of business. Any interests that need to be declared, could you do so at the appropriate time if necessary? And just remind any conflicts especially if there are any conflicts in the agenda items today. There's no public forum, but how we will run, I think this morning is, I think we had 11, we had 3 cancellations in terms of the hearing of submissions, but our first submitters are due at about 9:15, so there's probably a bit of stopping starting, or we could speak slowly and longly. No, they're not ready yet. But anyway, yeah, we'll do karakia. So we'll do karakia. Wait, no need to stand. Kia ora te marina, kia whakapapa panamu te mona. Hei hui rā te mātu tu rangi nei, aruhu atu, aruhu mai, tātu tātu katoa, hui e tai kia. Thank you for the reminder. Just a few housekeeping matters in terms of how we'll run the hearings. The individuals, as per usual, have 5 minutes, will speak for 5 minutes with a bell at 3 minutes. Those speakers representing groups or organisations will have 10 minutes, the bell at 8. Because we are at alert level 2, it'll be done virtually. So when it comes to questioning, and it's just questions of clarification of the submission, it's not an opportunity to cross-examine and get into debate, but just questions of clarification. It would be very helpful for the presenters if you could introduce yourself by name so they know who's asking the question. The submitters will have a picture of me, lucky them, and also of the chamber, but it'll be really helpful if you could just introduce yourself so they feel like they're speaking to an individual. And that's really about it. Any questions as we wait for our first submitter? We'll chat amongst ourselves for a bit. How are we going? Okay, with that, we'll adjourn for a couple of minutes, and the first one is Elisa Black at 9:15. about ready. Like to invite Lisa Black to speak to her submission, page 14 in your agenda, and submission number 24482. Are you there, Lisa?
Nā koutou.
Yeah, welcome. In these rather unusual times to do it by Zoom. As I said to the councillors, you've got 5 minutes and a bell at 3 minutes.
Kia ora matua. Thank you for considering lowering our speed limit to 30 kilometres in Hill Valley. I'm speaking in support of this proposal. I think the crux of it is that Hill Valley is a country lane and we use it like one. People walk up and down at all times of day for exercise and for pleasure. There's several families in the valley who do this, some older people. Many people walk their dogs off leash. There are horse riders, there can be escaped animals. And after school and on weekends, there's many children riding their bikes up and down, generally fairly erratically because it's a country lane. So we're talking, when I say people sort of walk up and down, we're talking about strolling or meandering or promenading, you know, all very sort of enjoyable walking activities. Some of the issue with the speed limit that we have started, I think, when the road was paved. It was a good thing paving it because there was so much dust and noise in summer. It was really quite intolerable, especially for those whose houses are next to the road. But the metal surface did signal that it was a slow and careful road to drive on, and paving it sent a pretty strong signal that you could drive faster, and that you could drive faster safely. But that's really only true of the surface of the road, not the uses of it. So I think in this valley, we need quite strong signals about what's actually safe here. It's a very short valley. I'm one of the last houses on the legal road. The formed road does extend a little bit further up, and I'm at 131. So the road goes about 1.3 kilometres. So nobody needs to get up here in a tearing hurry. I mean, 30 kilometres is plenty for driving 1.3 kilometres. 30 particularly, I think, is good because it's a bit unusual. It's a bit slower than one might expect for this kind of situation. Talking with my neighbours, we think if the speed limit was 40, people would see it and think, oh, well, I can go sort of 45, 50. If they see 30, they'll think, oh, that's unusual, got to be careful. And that's really what we want here. That's my submission. Are there any questions from?
Any questions of the submitter? Yeah, Councillor Noonan.
Hello, Lisa. Gail. Yes, Gail Noonan speaking. My question is, how many families are up that road completely?
I could probably get that information to you later if you wanted. There's not that many houses, but there's more than when I was growing up. So I'd have to count up and email you that information if you'd like.
Not a problem. I'm just wondering whether like there's 10 or there's 20 or there's 50, but.
Well, there's definitely not 50 because it's a fairly sparsely occupied valley.
That's okay. I'm just referring to your submission where you talk about people strolling, and I get the impression it's sort of a family area, and that's really what I'm trying to ascertain.
Yes. I think it is very much so, and it's not only people from this valley who use it like that. People from Ross Road and the Lard and elsewhere in Hera come here because it's a nice quiet road to walk on or to ride on their bikes with their kids and that sort of thing. So the catchment for the recreational use of the road is probably certainly larger than just this valley itself. Our neighbours at 194 own the land that is between the end of the formed road and the start of the forestry road, and they very kindly let people traverse up there to go through the forestry. And I know that some people commute by bike to Nelson over through the forestry roads, some down through the Maitai, and then I think some down closer to the start of centre of New Zealand. So there is a larger catchment than just this valley.
Thank you. I was just wanting to get a picture, and you've done that very, very well. Thank you.
It is a dead end, so there's no through vehicular traffic, just bikes and people.
Councillor Sanson.
Kia ora, Lisa. Councillor Rachel Sanson speaking. Thanks very much for your submission. I'm just wanting to check, and it might be an officer who can tell us, but if it is actually proposed to be a 30-kilometre, is it in the proposal that we went?
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask of you, Lisa, because at the moment, Teal Valley Road is a 60k speed limit, and
Yes.
in the statement of proposal that went out, there was no, it wasn't on the schedule of roads to be amended. So I'm just wondering, where did your proposal come from?
I will have to check. I'll reread the document if I can, if I still have it. My understanding was that Teal Valley was and Ross Road wasn't proposed as 30. So Aroha if I have that wrong, but I can check that source as well. Let me just make a note of that.
Yeah, at the moment, it's, I think on the schedule it's shown as 60k.
It's currently 60k. That's not appropriate. And one of my neighbours was very active in asking people to submit on the consultation last year or the year before. And that was the time at which we discussed the 30. So I know that other people have proposed this. I had thought that it was on the official council material as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, we're just about around of time, but the next bit is not ready. So Councillor Fulton and then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Lisa. It's Councillor Fulton here. I just have a question in terms of, it sounds like there's a lot of neighbourhood support for the speed limit to be dropped from 60 down to 30. Are there any neighbours who would want it to remain at 60 that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Nobody has said to me that they're happy with 60. Okay. Nobody has said that they'd prefer 40 or 50. Okay. Yeah, very happy for any councillors who have further questions to contact me about this, and I can run around the neighbours. And
so you feel like your view is fairly representative of your neighbourhood?
Of the people I've talked to, yes. I don't know everybody in the valley. It has expanded since I was a child and I've been away for a long time. But of the neighbours I know, yes, there is support.
Thank you so much.
Question from Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. Lisa, is there footpaths on either side of the road? You mentioned it was recently sealed. What footpaths is there?
There are no footpaths. It's been sealed for a couple of decades. I think must have been late 90s, early 2000s that it was sealed. But no footpaths, very much country lane stuff.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I really appreciate the time and effort into your submission and the time taken to present this morning. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mōrī ora.
Mr. Chair, can we have a clarification, please? On page 5 of our agenda, how does the page number relate to? Got there? I just want to talk about how it says, for instance, the submittal we just had says page 15. How does that relate to the?
Yes, the page attachment. And there's a page on for the agenda, so that's the extra page. Because the next submitter is ready, so I'd like to invite Mr. Marsh to make his submission, and his is on page 9 of the attachment, page 8 of the agenda, and the submission number is 24487. You there, Mr. Marsh?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
That's good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is David Marsh. I first moved to Springley Heights, number 1 Springley Heights, in 2007, and I've been here ever since. My house is located on the corner, really, of both Springley Heights and Farley Street. Farley Street being on one side and Springley Heights being the main road. I'm the chairman of the coordinator of the neighbourhood support group, and I have canvassed them about this submission which I'm making today. I do quite realise that under the current way that you're looking at these roads for reduced speed limits, that Springley Heights and Farley Street are not necessarily going to come under this. But I did want to bring to your attention that I believe your criteria are not wide enough to include roads which have specific dangers. Both Springley Heights and Farley Street are on substantial inclines. Now you will see in my submission, which I sent yesterday, a document which has got 4 photographs. Can you see that, please?
Yes, we've got them.
Right, okay. I'll do with the top. Can you see all 4 at the same time? Because I can't see it at the moment.
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. Well, let's take the top 2, which are taken from Springley Heights. Now, you can see my letterbox. That's the one on the left-hand side there. Now, Springley Heights has only got a pathway, as you can see, on one side. My house, to cross over from my house as a pedestrian from one side of the street to the other, I am completely blind to any drivers coming down that road, which is less than 20 meters. Now, that's not within the stopping distance of a car traveling at 50 kilometers an hour, as I found out on several occasions when exiting my drive to find myself confronted by somebody about to T-bone me. Now, that's the one on the right-hand side shows the picture of somebody coming down the hill. That's the same hedge now on the right-hand side. You can see on the left-hand side of the first picture. And you can see you cannot see my driveway at all. So this would not meet your criteria because it's got a pathway on one side, but it's incredibly dangerous. And there has already been a number of near misses, both for myself and other people. You will also see the junction at the bottom of the road, which if you look straight down through the 2 sets of hedges, that's the junction of somebody coming off of Farley Street to turn into Springley Heights, again is completely blind to anybody coming down the hill. And so there again, we've also had instances where people have mistakenly cut the corner or done something too fast, and there's a very severe chance of an accident here. We've had one severe accident on that corner when a dog ran out and took a council employee off his bicycle, and it involved a man breaking his shoulder and being incapacitated for several months. I'll now move to the bottom pictures, 2 pictures. This is the view from approximately the same position. My garden's on the right-hand side here by that hedgerow. And if you're driving up Farley Street, again, it looks quite clear, but that road is just 25 meters up before you get to the bend. And you can see that if on the second picture on the right-hand side, I've walked up about 10 meters and bingo, there's a car parked. And so any cars coming down the hill will be on the wrong side of the road. Where you see the rubbish bin on the right-hand side, in the last 2 months, a small child ran out from that spot. They were less than 3 years old. And if you go back to the left-hand side picture, you can imagine that the driver coming up the hill had no sight of this child and only just missed him by the skin of his teeth. Now we have both these roads are dead ends. Both Springley Heights and also Farley Street are dead ends. And I fully support the previous speaker who was saying that dead ends should be also added to your criteria. And that is why I've made that suggestion of you widening the criteria to say you should be looking not just at simple measures which you've got so far, which are pavements on one side or no sides, but also taking into a more complex view, looking at the dangers assessed in each of these roads, and in particular those on cul-de-sacs. On both these roads, there is no need for anyone to be doing any more than 30 kilometers an hour because they're dead ends. And certainly leaving the 50 kilometer an hour speed limit in place is an incitement for people to do 50. If they know it's 30, then I think they will take it seriously. Thank you very much, and I'll happily take any questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Marsh. Opportunity for any questions from council. I'm just looking around the room. Doesn't look like there's any questions. Doesn't mean your submission. It means your submission is very, very clear and well understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. I know you know the area very well, so you can add to that comment. I know you stood nearly on that street corner, and yes. So yes, you know exactly the place I'm talking about. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And I do fear that with the number of small children that are in this area, sooner or later we're going to have a very serious accident.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks very much for your submission. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Bye then.
Bye. Next submitter, we'll just move, one's arrived early, Deirdre Mcalpine. This is on page, I think, 157 of the agenda. Page 149 of your attachments, submission number 24670. I'd like to welcome Deirdre Mcalpine. You there, Deirdre?
Okay.
Welcome. You'll need to turn your mute off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. I'm not as savvy as my grandsons think I am.
Yeah. It's quite handy to get a 12-year-old off the street. They'll know more about IT than I do.
I know.
Okay.
Well, good morning. Should I just start?
Yes, you're welcome. We're all listening. Can you see us? You can see the chamber?
I can. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Zoe Mcalpin. I live at 21 Seymour Avenue, the Brook, or as my neighbors and I call it Speedway Alley. I am in support of lowering the speed limit to 30K. I am fully in support of this as it will make our streets, children, and elderly much safer. We have 2 schools within 3 blocks of Seymour Avenue. And though the majority of vehicles are traveling the speed limit, 50 seems a bit fast, especially since you made a narrow space where that was supposedly supposed to mitigate the speed traveled, but doesn't seem to make any difference. There are still jerks that treat Seymour Avenue and Brook Street as a speedway. And we have noticed that putting the smiley signs at the end of the street that, you get a smile if you're going slowly, but it also posts the speed that you're going. And so some of these young guys with their loud cars seem to drive faster so they can see just how fast they can go on our street before they hit the curb. So I feel that as part of lowering the speed limit, it's important to post that new speed limit with signs and perhaps some enforcement, because I have no hope of people traveling through our neighborhoods at the proper speed if they are not aware of what the allowable speed is. I spent several days during lockdown working on my landscaping of my front yard, and I was easily able to hear the racing vehicles as they were approaching from blocks away. So I kept a pad and pen with me so I could write down their registration and car color, because they're going so fast, I couldn't even take a picture of them. It was blurry because they just go by so fast. And I made a list and I would gladly turn that over if requested. It was only, a 10-day period. Most of the time I can't get out of the house fast enough, grab my phone, run out into the street and be able to catch them. It'll be better in the summertime because then the windows will be open. So what is to be done about these people who don't seem to care about the danger and noise they are creating? I talked to some of my neighbors about speed bumps, but they said that council had already considered speed bumps, but didn't feel that that was a good idea. A CCTV camera. I mean, I feel so strongly about this. I have considered buying a speed gun or radar detector just to clock speeders. But I am ready and willing to be able to be part of a citizen enforcement patrol, if that would be helpful. Anything to make this, I mean, it's frightening. It's frightening when these cars just go roaring past. We have a couple of guys who are racing, and they even pass each other on our narrow little, street. As part of the historic district, it just should not be allowed. Anyway, that's really all I have to contribute. I just wanted to be an impassioned.
Your passion is coming through.
Good. Thank
Good.
you.
Good. Got some opportunity for some quick time for some questions. Got Councillor Sanson. Any other? Yeah, Councillor Sanson.
Thanks through the chair. Kia ora, Deirdre. Councillor Rachel Sanson here. Thanks very much for your submission. Really appreciate you taking the time. I'm just wanting to check from Seymour Avenue, is that the route that kids take to get to the walkway down to St Joseph's and Elton Street? Down to Central School.
I haven't interviewed them. We do have St. Joseph's, and then we have Central School that is on the walkway. And yeah, I would say that we have, I've never stopped to count them, but we have 50 to 100 kids walking by in the mornings and in the evenings going to school. They've got scooters and balls and equipment, and sometimes parents walk down and pick them up, and they're walking their dogs, and it's quite congested during those periods of time.
And is there a safe crossing for them from the walkway back to the other side of Seymour Ave?
There is no crosswalk. I was told they're called zebra stripes areas. There's nothing marked as far as a crosswalk is concerned. No.
Okay. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's it. No other questions from councillors? Well, thank you very much, Zoe. It's a very, very clear and very passionate submission.
I was a bit nervous, so thank you very much.
You did great. And thank you very, very much.
Okay.
All right, next one we have Bernie Goldsmith. She's on the phone, so we won't be able to see Bernie. So we'll invite Bernie to come forward. Can you hear us, Bernie? Yeah, we're just doing the technology catch up. We'll just take a short adjournment and get this sorted.
We're having problems with the net. She was actually downstairs. Are you willing to give her a person?
We haven't given that option to anyone else, so. No, the short answer is.
If you'd like to bring Jane in.
Or do Jane and then.
We'll see what we can set up.
Yeah. Right. Isn't technology wonderful? So Bernie's still waiting to come in, but we can bring in Jane Murphy from the DHB. Right. Can you hear us, Jane?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you see us, the chamber?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Right, we've got your submission. You've got 10 minutes, so our bell at 8. So
Great. This is just a very short presentation just to say that the Public Health Service and Nelson Marlborough Health, we fully support the speed limit reduction as speed affects the likelihood of severity of crashes. So we support it for 2 reasons. Because A, it will make our streets safe, and also it supports the concept of mode sharing. And it's more likely to encourage people to walk, cycle, and use micro-mobility. And it allows for better amenity and accessibility. That's all I wanted to say, but thank you for the opportunity.
yeah, opportunity to ask any questions. Yeah, Councillor Fulton, it's a question.
Was a bit faster your your presentation. I'm just formulating my question in my head. In terms of it's a great submission. Thank you so much, Jane. In terms of the DHB thinking about how they support prosperous economies and how we allow traffic to move, do you see any issue with decreasing the speed limit with regards to that? Do you think that the move to the modal shift thinking still allows people to commute and get around as they need to for their workplaces?
So you're asking if the DHB supports mode shift because it supports economic opportunity?
How does modal shift support economic opportunity? That's a good question. That's my question.
Okay. I think if we look at cars travelling into cities now, we've got a large number of people travelling with 1 person per vehicle, and when you've got 1 person per vehicle, that takes up a lot of road space. So the moment you can get people to change modes, because Nelson's quite blessed with the number of cycleways that we've got. Of course, there are gaps in the network, but fantastic cycleways into the city. And there's quite a few people on them, but I'd never say the cycleways are congested. So there's room for a lot more people to use those cycleways to walk. And also, if we can get more people onto the buses as well, then you're going to have fewer cars on the road. Therefore, you've got more economic opportunity, because those people who need to use cars, there's always going to be people who need to use freight. There's going to be opportunity. Situations where we all need to use our cars a few days a week, or whatever it works for us and our families. So, but if we can get that shift, if we can make it easier for people to use those other abilities, then it frees up space in the system, and that allows for more economic activity. I do know that Community and Public Health in Christchurch did a big evaluation a number of years ago, I think it was 2013, which looked at the economic advantages of promotion of cycleways. So it was looking at an economic perspective, but also with a public health lens over it. So if you would like, I could send that report to you.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I guess I was just thinking about it in terms of, how does the Ministry of Health support Ministry of Transport or NZTA with some of this shifts in thinking? And as well, I guess it would be interesting to know whether when people make those changes to modal shift, if more physical exercise means less days off work, that kind of thing as well. So I think it's an important conversation we continue to have about how we support better health outcomes for our community, whilst looking at transport and safety on our roads.
Yep, certainly happy to have a conversation with you, Kate, or come and talk to the council.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mel Courtney. Jane, thanks for your submission. Jane, this city, this smart little city of ours, is surrounded by hills. Does the DHB have a position on speed on our hills surrounding our city? We're looking primarily at the CBD at the moment, dropping to 30k. But I'm just thinking that we may need, when you look through the submissions today and listening to the community, we may need to look at our speed limit on a permanent basis on our hill signs. You've got a view on that?
Well, looking at speed overall, if we're looking at spaces where we've got narrow footpaths, where you've got competition between cyclists, you've got competition between pedestrians, and people using higher speeds on cars, you're going to have greater conflict. In the moment you get conflict, you've got injuries and potential death. So we'd be happy to look at lowering speeds, especially when you come to hill situations, because they tend not to be large straight roads. You have corners, and the more corners, the harder the visibility, so more risk. So anything we can do to make them safer, lower the risk, we'll support.
All right. Jane, you've got a bit of background noise in your...
Yeah, so I've got some technical difficulty at the moment, and lost connection when I tried another office, so sorry.
It's coming through loud and clear.
Sorry.
Right. Any other questions from council? No, that's good. Thank you very much. If you've got any additional information, could you send that into the governance advisors so it can be circulated to all of the councillors?
Sure. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we're just waiting for Bernie to get hooked up to a laptop, so she wishes to be seen. While we've got a bit of a pause here, perhaps she's just joined in now, so we'll. It's testing. Rightio. I'll bring Bernie Goldsmith into Zoom or the webinar. Yeah. Wait. Now, Bernie's submission is on page 126 of the agenda. Or 125 of the agenda through to page 127, and it is page 117 of the attachment, and the submission number is 24586. Okay.
Bernie, please unmute and turn your video on.
Just take a quick adjournment or wait for technology to catch up.
No. Text me where you are.
Okay, bye. Can you video me to see how I do it? Just me. Can you push that video? Is it? We
No,
can
I can't hear
hear mute
anything.
me. Invite. Start video or mute. No. You can't hear anything.
Yeah. Right, Bernie, you ready to go?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm down in the council office below.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we're over in your hands. Where you
Oh
going?
yeah. Hey, thank you everybody for listening to me. I'm Bernie Goldsmith. I'm the director of Safe Cabs. It's an all-woman service on the top of the Nelson and the Tasman region. I've been working the roads for the past 8 years, driving between 50 to 70 hours a week every week. So day and night. So I kind of know how the city moves and when it moves. I oppose lowering the speed limit around the CBD because I know over COVID, essential workers, which all the transport industry was, tripled their workload. And during that time, it made me realise who was important in this region as well. And transport was definitely one of them. If it wasn't for us, a lot of people wouldn't have got their food or their groceries or their goods or their services, and they weren't able to be transported to their jobs, which was quite special at a time when everybody else was in fear and at home. So I thought about it and thought I'd come to this meeting and talk about things. So one of the two issues that you bring up is safety and efficiency on our roads. When I looked at the document, over the last 5 years, 0 people have been in accidents that was concerned with speed. So I don't think speed is a factor here. As far as efficiency goes, because I drive all the time, I see how slow the traffic has been going. It can be frustrating for people who drive every day, but we need to get to work and we need to get our kids to school, and we need to, most of us who are essential workers are working between 10 and 12 hours. Hey, sorry, your people are coming in. Between 10 and 12 hours a day, every day. We can't do that. We can't get to our work on push bikes or on buses because of the fact that we have to carry most of what we do and we need for the day during the day. Most of the people who are essential workers are on contracts. They're not hourly. So it's not about us getting to work earlier and we make the same amount of money. What it's about is that the more goods and services we deliver, the more we get paid. So our time won't stop. We will still work 70 hours, but if you reduce the time, if you reduce the speed, then we will just make less money, which means that we will probably decide to close our businesses. A lot of us transport people are struggling as it is. There's no more hours that we can work. Yeah, I don't actually have a lot to say, but I do know that I've seen a lot of you out on Friday and Saturday nights on the side of the road waiting for taxis. You can increase that by at least an hour if you make us wait and do 30 Ks along the Bridge Street. You can be certain of that. We've got probably, once 3 o'clock hits, we've probably got 45 minutes to pull everybody out of that town before there's a ruckus. And a ruckus is something you don't need in your CBD. You know, people get quite upset when they're left on the side of the road waiting. They get upset when their food's delivered cold. And I'm sure every one of you that are sitting around that table get food delivered to your places. Just remind yourselves the essential workers are delivering those food to you. We'll end up slowing down, which means you won't get your food delivered, you won't get your parcels delivered on time, you won't even get your taxi on time. And so I stand here on behalf of the people that work those roads and work between 70 hours every week, 6 days a week. I don't think I've got too much more to say. I hope you take us into consideration, the people who work on those roads.
Happy to take any questions?
Yeah, okay.
Any questions, Bernie? Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Kia ora, Bernie. Rohan here. I'm just wondering, you know, Bridge and Hardy Street are they're both 500 metres long roughly and have multiple
I've seen you there many times, Rowan.
Have multiple speed bumps and pedestrian crossings.
Yeah.
How much do you think that this speed limit change will slow you down?
We pretty much have to avoid, especially on Bridge Street. You know what Bridge Street's like. So we pretty much have to go around people because all the young ones, like yourself, are on phones. You know, they're not looking at the roads, they're just crossing the roads on their phones. So we know what to do. We know to keep everything safe, the essential workers. And pretty much everybody slows down in the CBD. If you put a speed limit in the CBD at 30 Ks, and we happen to go over that, that's us losing our licenses. That's not what we want.
Yeah, I'm just so when you're navigating these people, you know, what speeds are you going at?
Around 30 or 40, but we don't need a law to do that. We do it naturally out of common sense.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Edgar.
Thank you. Bernie, can you just please clarify the point you made? It's just right towards the end of your submission. You've said, I oppose this because Richmond has completely adopted the opposite strategy, but they've got 30 K. So are you talking about speed limit or something else? Because their CBD is also 30 K. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm worried that we are struggling, the essential workers, to even deliver the things that we need to do. I wasn't aware that they're on 30 Ks, but I do know that our city, because I've been transporting people around, I've noticed that there's less and less. I don't know whether you've noticed it, and I am worried that these kind of rules being put in, particularly the traffic lights outside Nelson City Council. I mean, I avoid that place like the plague. You know, it's slowing it down, and it's making people make a decision, and their decision is to go and shop in Richmond. And I'm worried for our city that the more regulations you put on it, the worse people are going to want to go and shop somewhere else. You can already see it. There are more seagulls in the CBD than people at the moment.
Thank you for that, Bernie.
All good.
Yeah, no other questions? Thanks, Bernie. With your written submission and backed up with your verbal one, speaking to it, your submission is very, very clear. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Okay, councillors, we're way ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. A couple of people have pulled out, so have cancelled. And the ones, we've got Mr. Douglas at 10:25. We're trying to get a hold of them. They're not responding. So we've got a break until 10:25 at the earliest. So we'll take a break. We've got Jeanette Lash, Claire Scott. What was the other one? Yeah. And we've heard from Jane Murray, we've heard from Deirdre Mcalpine. So the next one we've got is Mr. Douglas at 10:25. So I'll take a break until then. We'll get underway again, reconvene. Thank you coming to come back to the table. Our next presenter is ready, Mr. Charles Douglas. He's coming early. Okay, so that is on page 178 of your agendas. Page 70 of the attachments, and the submission number is 24714. You there, Mr. Douglas? Read your submission, an opportunity to speak to it. It's over to you. So you've got 5 minutes and a bell at 3 in your hands. Mute me. Can you hear me, Mr. Douglas? No, I'm on mute, but even though...
And what does it say to you?
Okay, Mr. Douglas, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Just can't hear anything.
Remute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes? No?
Yeah. Yeah, good to go, Mr. Douglas. He can't hear.
I just need some confirmation that my audio is working correctly. Great. I'll start.
Please.
Cool. Look, I want to talk about road safety on Toswell Road today. I lived on Toswell Road for 4 years. I work in town at the port, Sealord. I've just had a big accident on Toswell Road at the corner of Stansell and Toswell. It's a blind corner. Someone went over the centre lane, hit me. I'd probably be in critical condition or dead if I wasn't in a vehicle. Up until this point, I've been considering cycling. I guess that's well and truly off the cards now until road safety on the street can be improved. It's an unclassified road, according to the council, but it has the traffic, volume of traffic of a thoroughfare, an actual thoroughfare or a mini arterial, it seems. The 40k speed limit is in place, but there's no real deterrence in making people adhere to that speed limit. There's no speed bumps, islands, or any other physical form really stopping people from speeding. So the speed tends to increase on the straights, and they take corners quite quickly. The issue with Toswell Road is it's a hill road, and it's used as a shortcut to avoid the main arterials on Waimea and Rocks Road. And the issue is I don't think it's ever been designed for the kind of capacity it's taking to date. Therefore, I feel at the moment it would be classified as high risk, and I'd love to see accidents like mine avoided in the future. It's going to be particularly important because on many parts of this road, it's in the shade, so it gets icy and frosty during winter, and therefore accidents like the one I was involved in, where people lose control because of the condition of the road itself. So many corners that don't get sun until about middle of the day, for example. I guess the other thing worth noting is just around the noise. and the privacy as well. So with the increased volume of traffic on this road, but yeah, it being unclassified, I think it's sort of doing residents a disservice in that sense. They can't really improve the noise and privacy aspects of their homes because of the classification. So I think if we're going to maintain that same classification, therefore we're going to have to do something about making it a bit safer for everyone and promoting other ways of other safe ways of transport, like cycling, running and walking, given that there's only just one footpath, given how narrow and windy it is. Yeah, that's really all I have to say around Tozzle Road, and I'd love to see some action taken as part of this road safety initiative NCC's investigating.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Douglas. A very clear submission. Opportunity to ask any questions from the council. First one is, I hope you're recovering from your crash. Oh. Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
We can, you'll type them in. You'll just have to bear with us. You'll listen to the question, make sure we've got the question correct, send it, and then we'll wait for him to answer.
Yeah.
Possible just to let him know that he can actually hear our questions?
He knows that.
He knows that.
Yes, okay.
Question from Councillor Edgar.
I was just going to ask, because he mentioned that the speed limit's already 40. Sorry, he mentioned the speed limit's already 40. People are already clearly going over that, and he mentioned speed humps. I was just wondering, if he thought speed humps would be more effective. So here's the actual question. Just wondering if he thought speed humps would be more effective than reducing the speed limit, since people are already going over the posted speed limit. Or both. Yeah, or both, yeah. This is amazing. It's so good. So
good. Yep, not sure if that's a question or a statement, but certainly feel that speed humps or the various forms they take would be more effective than a speed limit reduction. As I said, there's nothing really preventing vehicles from sticking to 40 or below as it stands right now. So I feel there needs to be some physical implementation to ensure that happens. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. Just regarding speed humps, and probably a caution, because I have experience with this, having one outside the house. The only thing about speed humps for
the
those...
question is
yeah, I know. Is when a trailer goes over a hump and you live next door and it's got one heavy item in it, so they need to be careful where those are placed.
Okay, is that a question?
Your thoughts?
Okay, Councillor Sanson, question.
Kia ora. I'm really sorry to hear about your accident. Councillor Rachel Sanson here. My question is, as Toswell and Stansell are not on the current investigation of speed reduction, the question is coming, a really short question.
I mean, yeah, that's going to create a little bit of noise, I suspect. So, I mean, that's something we'll need to keep in mind. I don't think there needs to be loads and loads of speed humps, perhaps just on the straights, where the ability to pick up speed before corners, particularly blind corners, is key. So there's 2 or 3 stretches there. I think that's important. Not really sure what else to say. I think if you surveyed the people on Tozzle Road, they would be probably quite supportive. I've already spoken to a handful of them and let them know my experience and my accident recently in September. Sorry, August.
Yeah. Yeah, question from Councillor Sanson.
On the current investigation.
So the question is, do you think that Nelson City Council should be doing a broader review of speed across residential streets given to try and improve safety for cyclists?
Yeah, the question is, yes, we are, but it's the speed management review, which was using the new speed management guide from NZTA early next year.
Great. So it is quite valid for me, other elected members, to be asking that question in relation to a submitter who has noted that he was intending to cycle to work, was in a serious accident. And so if somebody could ask him my question, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, we'll ask the question, but...
Can you please provide the context to him, since he can't hear, that we are doing that next year, and so we're hoping that he would be supportive of that.
Yeah.
Really, I would, and I'm sure he will be.
Yeah. Well, the question's been asked.
Yes, I think any time a serious accident takes place, there should be a review done. As I said, I'd be in very bad condition if I wasn't driving a four-wheel drive truck that would hit me, and I guess. So let's think about if I was cycling that day, there could be a death or there could be a serious accident that goes in. So I think we need to look at all these incidents and take them quite seriously. I think also, just given that we're talking about road safety as well, I don't think, I'm not sure how NCC's thought about which roads to look at in particular, but I'm just hoping that some of my evidence and some of the things I'm saying that I think are all fact in nature, put this on your radar, and that we can sort of look at what can be done, at least a review of it, and then hopefully some positive change to avoid some of these instances from happening again. I mean, yeah.
Yes, it is that.
Is Hannah ready?
Thanks all.
Hello?
Hi Hannah, we've read your submission. It's page 181 on the agenda. Page 73, the attachment, agenda submission number 24720.
Cool.
We've read your submission, and there's an opportunity for you to speak to it. So
Wonderful.
good. Can you hear us okay? Can you see the chamber?
Yeah,
Correct.
perfect. And apologies in advance if there's any little kids that come in and interrupt, because I'm currently at school at the moment at morning tea.
Rightio, that's great.
I'm actually Charles's wife, the person that just spoke, and I grew up on the Tunanui Hills on Tamaki Street, which intersects with Toswell. So I guess over the years I've seen the difference in traffic and the amount of traffic that's come onto that road, especially as congestion, and we've got more people coming to Nelson to live in this beautiful community. But yeah, it's really concerning the speeds that people drive on that road now, pulling out of the driveway, because I've actually lived on two properties, so 78A Toswell Road and now at 52. And there's been so many near misses from pulling out of my driveway because people are at speed along that road. And also the other point of concern is when I go to visit my parents on Tamaki Street, and this has always been a dangerous point even from when I was a kid, turning from Toswell up to Tamaki Street, there's a blind corner that comes around there, and people just hit that with so much speed, and you have to really put your foot to the ground to actually get safely up that corner, which is another point that needs to kind of be raised. I'm surprised there hasn't been a crash there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, question from Councillor Fulton.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for your submission. I just so everyone's aware, I live on Stansell Ave, so I live just around the corner from you, and I'm very aware of the increase in traffic volumes, particularly over the last decade. So in the last decade, there's been a massive increase in the number of cars driving along those two roads, and I agree with you, they're often doing well over 60 kilometres an hour. In terms of moving forward, so this, you've submitted to a consultation over decreasing speed limits to 30, of which those two aren't on our list. Toswell and Stansell aren't on our list. In terms of moving forward into how do we address the issues of high volumes of traffic going far too fast in an already 40k an hour neighbourhood area, do you think it would be, and your husband touched on this briefly, in terms of traffic calming and speed humps or minimise, we could look at planting, do you think that would be the best approach? Or do you think it would be also important to take the speed down to 30 in that area?
Sorry, just quickly, what do you mean by planting?
So we could be, so when we look at speed minimisation or looking at neighbourhood areas, you might be putting in not just raised traffic humps, sometimes you put in trees as well. So you're trying to narrow your road corridor so you only have one lane, and you're trying to encourage cars to drive much more slowly.
Sure, yes. Yeah, to be honest, at the moment it's 40k and no one drives at speed limit, so I don't think necessarily just dropping it to 30k an hour is going to make much difference. I do think there needs to be things put in place to make people slow down, like speed bumps or narrowing the road in places. I was driving along, I think it's Queen's Road off Victoria, and you come back down towards town to Russell Street the other day, and I noticed that they've got lots of things in place there that meant that I had to drive at a very slow speed along those roads, and there were some great ideas there that I came across. Such as kind of like your island style speed bump, instead of just a small didit one, you have to slow down, go across, and then slow down again to get off it. Yeah, I think more needs to be done to actually make people slow down rather than just having a sign that at the moment doesn't seem to be doing too much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. And do you think that other residents in your street would be supportive of that as well?
100%. I know when we lived at 78A Toswell, when we first arrived, the first thing our neighbours said to us is, you have to be really careful coming out of your driveway because people speed, and they told us that they'd previously gone to council to get speed bumps hopefully put around, but they were unsuccessful, which was nice to have a heads up, because it was very true. The first time I tried to pull out, I noticed it straight away. So I know that just from the people we lived around there, in that part of the community on Toswell, they were very supportive. I haven't actually chatted to our neighbours because I only have really one neighbour to the right side of us on Toswell. And with COVID, I've been trying to keep space. But I'm sure that people in that area are very willing to have that put in place.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. No other questions? Thank you very, very much, Hannah. Very clear submission. We know what your view is, and I hope your husband, Charles, makes a full recovery.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Our next submitter is Mr. Bevan Woodward. Thank you so much for being so patient. I know you've been waiting a long time. You there, Mr. Woodward? Thank you, Mr. Woodward. Thank you for being so patient.
Good morning. My pleasure. Yeah. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. You're representing Nelson, Bicycle Nelson Bay, so 10 minutes and a bell will go at 8. So we're ready for you. Please begin.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you and good morning, councillors, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Bevan Woodward. I'm a transport planner, and yes, I represent Bike Nelson Bays. Our submission, which I will take as read, I would like to focus on one key element in our submission, and that is in paragraph 5. We support the amendments as proposed, but we do have some concern that the level of ambition appears low, and so hence under C, we really want to take this opportunity to talk about the opportunity of 30km/h speed limits as the default for all urban streets. And you will see in our submission under 5C that we refer to the recent United Nations Stockholm Declaration, and 150 countries signed that declaration in support of 30k urban streets, and New Zealand was one of those signatories. So hence, that is the purpose of my presentation, which I hope will come up on the screen.
Just bear with us for a moment.
Certainly.
So if you've got, how many screens have you got, or slides have you got in your PowerPoint?
There are about 12 slides.
Oh, no, that's fine. Just let us know when you need to change the slide.
So the presentation will talk about the issues around speed and why it's so important we address it, and come back to that key point of 30km/h as what I call the magic number. Next slide, please. In terms of road safety, the higher the speed, the risks increase exponentially. Number one there is the severity of serious injury, of the chances of death. Number two, it takes much longer to stop, hence the greater likelihood of a crash. And number three, our field of vision reduces with increased speed, hence also the likely increase in having a crash. We also live in a world, if I can go to the next slide, please, where drivers are often distracted, they're often impatient, they're frustrated by traffic congestion. It happens to us all, we're running late. And so the environment on our streets is becoming increasingly unsafe. And if I go to the next slide, we're also driving vehicles which are much more powerful. They accelerate quickly, they handle extremely well. The next slide, please. They can crash and bash over speed humps. And there's also a culture of, at times on our roads, of this idea of in this particular case, driving a beast of a vehicle. You see how they highlight how mean this vehicle is. So we've got this environment where we've got high traffic speeds on our roads. We've got distracted, impatient drivers. We've got powerful, fast vehicles. So in my view, it is no wonder we're struggling to get people to walk and cycle. We know that the top selling vehicles in New Zealand, new vehicles, are SUVs like this or trucks like this. And so hence, parents, of course they won't send their children to walk or cycle to school. They'll put them in their cars and drive them. So what do we do? What's the best practice approach to handling, to looking how we can address this issue? We'll go to the next slide, please. Best practice is called the safe system approach to road safety, and it has 4 pillars of safety. One of those pillars is safe speeds, and this really takes the optimal speed in terms of movement of traffic and in terms of safety for all road users. The safe speed limit for roads where cars and pedestrians and cyclists are mixing is 30 km/h. And that's a really important thing to understand because of the implications of what it means for you as councillors in terms of how our city is managed. You'll see that there's other speed limits there for where cyclists and pedestrians are separated from the traffic flows, but that 30 kilometres an hour is the key number. And this comes from the Dutch Institute for Road Safety, but it's widely embraced. 30 kilometres per hour as being the safe and appropriate speed limit for our urban streets. So now let's go to Copenhagen on the next slide. And this is downtown Copenhagen. The speed limit is 30 kilometres per hour. And I hope the thing that stands out for you is, well, hang on, where's all their cycling infrastructure? Where are the separated paths and the jutta bars and all these things? Where are the helmets? When you've got 30 kilometers per hour, you've got safe cycling. You've also got safe walking. It's much safer for a pedestrian to cross the road. You don't need all the cost of putting in a raised table pedestrian crossing. And as I mentioned, you don't need the cost of all that cycling infrastructure. If you can achieve 30 kilometers per hour, then you are creating safe streets for all of your citizens. And hence, we see 30 kilometers an hour widespread in many European countries. And if we take the next slide, please, just another example, which I took from in Cologne in Germany. There really isn't much more to it than that. Once you get your speed set at 30k and it becomes an accepted speed, then at virtually no cost, we can create safe walking and cycling. And one last example on that is in Wellington, just the experience of safer speeds. So I'll just go through a few more of the benefits of safer speeds and then conclude. So the next slide shows how the streets become more forgiving. People of all ages, this is 3 generations of Dutch people cycling, but it's become so natural and convenient to cycle. The next slide, I'm showing how it's better for business. And safer speeds where traffic is calmed right down makes for a much better shopping experience. In fact, I think that's even why shopping malls don't allow traffic to drive right through them, do they? They want traffic out of there completely, but calming traffic down and making it, for example, in Invercargill, a shared zone, it's better for business. The next slide, I'm just making the point that where traffic is calmed, is safe, then it's higher property valuations. Virtually nobody wants to live on a road which has fast traffic. And then the next 2 slides, I make the point, because we heard earlier from Bernie Goldsmith about, well, if you slow traffic down, we'll go back 1 slide, please. If you reduce the traffic speed, then you're obviously going to take a lot longer to get where you want to go. In fact, that's not the case. It sounds counterintuitive initially, but when you make traffic speed safe, a lot more people can cycle, a lot more people can walk. Public transport is a lot more accessible because most of us walk to get to our public transport. So we can achieve mode shift. If we can achieve mode shift, there's a lot less traffic on our roads. We actually get to where we want to be in our cars quicker, as well as making it safer for walking and cycling. And hence the next slide to really give a good example of how slower can be faster. And it's an example which NZTA put together to support their what's called ramp metering on motorways. And what they do is they actually slow traffic right down before it enters the motorway. And the overall effect is that they move more traffic. And that's what I'm saying 30 kilometre an hour speed limits can do. The next slide simply summarises the mass of benefits that we get from safe speeds. And I'll let you go through those, but I think I've covered them all off. I appreciate that implementing safe speeds can be controversial, but that is what we need your leadership for. For me, I look at the example of banning smoking in pubs. There are many questions and many doubters about this. Who will police it? Who will stop us from smoking in pubs? The pubs will suffer. People can't go to the pub and have a smoke and have a beer. Economically, it will be very bad for them. And of course, we've seen the opposite. More people go to the pub for a drink because they don't have to deal with smokers. It hasn't required any policing. I'm not saying that introducing 30 kilometre an hour speed limits won't require more policing, but I do believe that in time, once we transition to those 30 kilometre an hour speed limits, which will come ultimately, then very little policing will be required. So just to conclude my final slide, that 30 kilometre an hour urban streets are absolutely integral to the goals of Nelson City Council for sustainable transport, for efficient transport, and for livable communities. And 30 kilometre an hour speed limits are really the nearest thing to a silver bullet in the transport world, in that they address a multitude of sins. So thank you for your time. That concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions.
Right, we do have quite a series of questions. We've got Councillor Sanson, Councillor Neil Stevens, Councillor Laurie, and Councillor Brand. And Councillor Fulton.
Kia ora, Bevan. Councillor Rachel Sanson here. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Thanks very much. That was a really great submission. Super clear, really refreshing actually. And I think I just wanted to, I think it was great that you emphasised the low cost of or not needing cycling infrastructure if we are to look at reducing speeds. But I'm just wondering if there are any examples on, I guess, a larger scale where cities in New Zealand have maybe looked at adopting a 30 kilometre speed limit more broadly. So, I mean, you gave great examples, and the shared space in Invercargill, obviously the street in Christchurch and maybe Nio neighbourhood in Wellington. But are there any cities that are kind of looking at adopting this kind of 30 kilometre speed limit more broadly across their neighbourhood communities?
Yes, I think Auckland's a good example, and that's in a large area of 30 kilometres an hour. For the central business district and the adjoining suburbs. It has been difficult for the councils because New Zealand's speed management rules are somewhat outdated and cumbersome. As I'm sure council is aware, and I think it was mentioned earlier by the chair, that the rules are changing, and the legislation has been changed. The government has a program called Tackling Unsafe Speeds, and we are now awaiting post the election, because these things are political, let's face it, but post the election, NZTA will be putting out its new speed management rules for consultation. And so what I'm saying is that councils will be able to implement safer speeds much easier. But coming back to your question, Councillor, Auckland, Wellington, I know Hamilton are looking at it right now. So all over the country, councils are responding to that demand for safe speeds.
Okay, thanks very much, Bevan.
Councillor Neil Stevens.
Sort of Bevan, Rohan here. So yeah, just to firstly provide some comfort, through that new legislation we will be undertaking a broad network review of our speed limits. I just wanted to get a clearer sense, So when we're talking about urban streets that you'd envision dropping to 30, you're talking about sort of any street that doesn't have a fully separated and protected cycle and pedestrian thoroughfares. Is that correct?
Any urban street, residential, retail, that's correct.
And then one of the sort of common responses to proposals like this is that Nelson or New Zealand more broadly doesn't have the population or the population density to make it work. What would you say to that?
I don't fully understand the question by not having the density to make it work. Sorry, to make what work?
To make sort of these speed limit changes be effective.
Oh, I've not really heard that argument before. I don't think of it being a question of density. Look, there will be the doubters, the naysayers that, as I gave the example of smoking in pubs and who say it won't work, it can't work. I'm totally unaware of density really being an issue. If they are just suburban, urban, as I said, residential retail streets, then they can be made 30 kilometres per hour, and they should be.
Thanks, Bevan.
Thanks, Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, Bevan. Matt here. I really liked your presentation, and I think the smoking analogy is a really good one. Another one that I think is worth thinking about is how in 2012 we made the biggest changes that we've made to our road laws in several decades when we changed our give way rules. And there were some predictions that, there'd be carnage out there, but actually New Zealanders got their heads around the changes really quickly, and they worked, and no one would go back to the way we used to run things. That said, what's your response to people who might say, Nelsonians, they love their cars. We've probably got more cars per capita in Nelson than anywhere else in the country. They like driving at the speeds as they stand right now, and they're not going to want to change. And we can put signs up, but people are going to keep driving at 50 kilometres an hour.
So I'd respond to that with two key points. One is Nelsonians don't love their speeds. The survey that I've seen recently carried out by Tasman and Nelson councils on community perceptions, community responding to what are scientific surveys, not consultation where people choose to respond, but actual proper surveying shows that people want safer speeds on their urban streets. So that's number one. And number two, the one reason why there's a picture in my presentation of Cologne is because the people of Germany love their speed in terms of what they drive, their vehicles and the autobahns. That Germans, also know about speed, but they also know about the importance of safe streets for efficiency, for safety, for livability, and so forth. So, I hope that adequately answers your question, Councillor Laurie.
It does. Thank you, Bevan. I think New Zealanders have proven that they can change, and I think they could change in this way too. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Brand, then Councillor Fulton.
Great, thank you. Hi, Bevan, it's Trudy here. I just want to touch on a couple of points that you raised. One is you mentioned the 4 pillars and you focused on the 30 k's per hour as the main focus. What are the 3 other pillars?
Safe roads, safe vehicles, and safe drivers.
Right, because when the AA offered their defensive driving course to all drivers, including the young ones as they come through the school, they focus, and they're predominantly about having safe roads and safe vehicles, is understand your limitations as a driver and understand the limitations of the vehicle you're driving. So I sort of felt the emphasis coming from the driving instructors and the organisations that provide the training is actually the focus on themselves and the vehicle and have the awareness around the road and pay attention to the speeds. But the speed limit itself was not the number one priority. So with the 4 pillars, is the speed limit the number one priority?
No, I don't think it's presented in that way. The 4 pillars are presented without a priority order. However, speed comes through time and again as being the most important factor in determining the likelihood of a crash and the severity of that crash.
Okay, so last night on the news, when it was put across about the maintenance of the roads and the deterioration of the road surface having the greater impact on the vehicle, therefore it has a greater impact on the safety of people on the roads. So isn't it like the integration of all of the things together have to work in balance and in unison instead of just focusing on one particular thing?
Yes, they should work in unison. However, for decades, we have neglected speed. And now is the time to focus on speed because that's where we can make the greatest gains.
Okay, thank you. And then the other point that I just want to touch on is you raised another submitter's presentation about the time they spent on the road, and her presentation talked about the workers who use the road as their employment, and you mentioned that by going at 30 k's an hour and having that managed on most roads, as you just defined before, that would actually increase and create better use for those workers on the road. Are you aware that those workers on the road get from A to B to C and they have time restrictions before they are having to take breaks, or they have to do so many k's before they are enforced to take breaks? And therefore the point the other submitter was making is the longer time they spend on the road, it has a financial cost to the business and to the other determination, but it also has an impact on the road with emissions because the people are actually sitting on the road longer than what they normally would. So when you made your comment, how was that in relation to that?
So safer speeds unlock mode shift, and it's only through mode shift that we will improve travel efficiency, that we will reduce emissions, and we will not get mode shift until it is safe to walk and cycle on our roads, because I make the point in terms of walking is such an important aspect of public transport, because obviously most of us walk to and from public transport. So the issue of delays for the likes of Bernie and all the workers and everyone else on the road is that the fundamental issue is that there are too many cars on the road. It's not the speed limit. And so because there's too many cars on the road, then generally the intersections can't handle it. And she talked about the traffic lights at Trafalgar Street. They get so congested. These are the key issues. And if you can remove the number of vehicles, even by reducing the speed limit, what I'm trying to say is the impact of reducing the speed limit on the road itself pales into insignificance compared to the gains you make at the intersections when you have less traffic. And so she will benefit from safer speed limits. She doesn't quite realize it yet, but there's good news for her.
Okay. We'll keep moving. Our last question from Councillor Fulton.
Oh, look, thank you so much, Bevan, for your submission. It was a really excellent submission, and I really appreciated the time you spent explaining the nuances of some of these issues around speed and traffic flow. And I guess my questions, they've partly been asked by Rohan and Trudy, but I wanted to tease it out a little bit more. So Rohan had asked a question around population and that larger populations can somehow achieve these goals, whereas we might not be able to. And I'm just wondering, is that because a larger population, you have greater potential to have that modal shift? So you have more foot traffic and you have more cyclists. So you're still maintaining your economy because you've got a larger population, even if you have less cars on the road. Whereas is that fear coming from people like Bernie that less cars on the road mean our economy might be affected? Is there a confusion that economic prosperity is associated with the number of cars on the road for some reason? That seems to me to be some of the thinking, and I'm just wondering how could we communicate to those people who aren't quite understanding that actually if we decrease speed, then people will cycle and they will walk, and so we'll still have a busy urban city centre and we'll still achieve that economic prosperity, but in a different way. So how could we support people to understand your thinking more?
Well, that's a good question, and it is difficult to communicate these insights because people often are quite locked in their thinking, to be honest, and it's not until they see it. And so some cities around the world will trial, they'll do a large trial, so that people can see what it feels like, and then they ask people to choose. Then they say, okay, then we'll do a survey or a referendum to as to whether we leave these things in. It's very difficult, and I appreciate you raising the point about of communications, because often we don't do a good enough job in communicating what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it. So in terms of the city size, I know in Europe, many small towns have safe speed limits. And it's starting to happen. If I'm allowed to call Richmond a small town, I know that they're doing a lot of safer speeds throughout Richmond, and Blenheim's got safe speeds in its downtown. But still, this is quite a new thing for New Zealand, and I appreciate we have to be careful. We don't always refer to like European examples, but in Australia, you're seeing a lot of smaller towns on the Gold Coast implement safe speeds. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great start. My second question was around your actual written submission and the Stockholm Declaration. Could you just explain that a little bit? It's not clear to me how that fits in terms of the context of this, and I'm just interested in it a little bit more. If you could explain what the Stockholm Declaration is. I think I've got it that it's associated with your submission. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So every few years, the United Nations holds what they call global ministerial conferences on road safety, and and I believe the previous one was held maybe 10 years earlier. So every decade they set the scene for what they feel needs to happen if we are to improve road safety. So this Ministerial Global Conference on Road Safety was held earlier this year in Stockholm, and 150 countries from around the world attended, including New Zealand. Our Ministry of Transport unfortunately couldn't make it, but there were representatives from the Ministry of Transport and from NZTA. They signed the declaration, and the declaration covers a lot of really good material. It aligns with Nelson City Council's goal of mode shift, and it talks about that. And the key point that I was referencing is item 11 in that declaration, and that's a focus on speed management. I said earlier that speed management has been neglected. Speed management is the most controversial not in terms of the science and as a transport planner, it's a no-brainer, but in terms of social acceptance, and it's certainly the most political aspect of safety, and I think that's why it's been neglected for so long. But anyway, it says under 11, that they ask all countries to mandate a maximum road travel speed of 30 kilometres an hour in areas where vulnerable road users and vehicles mix. Vulnerable road users, of course, meaning pedestrians, cyclists, people on scooters and so forth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Right, that will bring us to conclusion. Thank you very much for your submission, Mr. Woodward. Devon, it's really appreciated, really considered. Obviously, the questions asked has generated a bit of interest. Anyway, that concludes our hearings this morning. Thank you very, very much for that. We will bring the meeting to a close. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just anything that we need for the report. Are we going to cover that outside the hearing?
We'll cover that.
Thanks, because I do have.
Yeah. Right. Right. Before we go, are there any other questions or information that the councillors will need from officers in their deliberations report? Right. We'll start. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. The emergency services, I see that the police have responded, but I couldn't see the ambulance service making a submission. And from what I could see, and I might be wrong, the ambulance service is limited to 30 kilometres above the posted speed limit. Am I correct in that first? And if that's the case, can we check with them regarding the Selwyn Place, because that's part of the ring road and how they get across town, how that might affect their service and potentially the other services that are used, whether they are, how that might affect getting across town, both police, ambulance and fire. If we could have that on that particular one and any other proposed changes. The other question I've got is that I think that the resolution for this piece of work had a count of pedestrians at Selwyn Place as well, and I'm wondering if that's taken place. The only reference I can see is the public life survey, which was probably done before this, but we were going to be doing another one between when we signed this out and the deliberations day. So how are we going with that and the results of that? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Yeah, we can come back if you think of anything. Councillor Brand? Councillor Skinner? Councillor Laurie, any other information you need? Councillor Sanson? Where's Pete? Councillor Edgar?
Yeah, it was just the traffic counts at Selwyn and the looking at the average speeds that was going to be done as part of that original discussion and meeting resolution. Thank you.
That's right, thanks. Councillor Courtney?
Just wondering, are we going to, Mr. Chair, look at the hills, that surround our city and include that as well? I know we're looking at the CBD mainly, but there was quite a...
And there was some home streets as well, which was specified in the statement of proposal. I think when we did this, there's work coming early in the new year. I think the speed management guide NZTA, when we can actually take a much more holistic and comprehensive approach across the city, the urban environment, and the whole city as a whole. I suppose just as useful to remind, we did this workshop, and it's probably useful to just go back and remember how this came about, because when we did the workshop, this was coming up, I think it was a clear view that where's the low-hanging fruit, where are the easy wins that we could get this across the line, and the advice was, well, we've got some streets that are pretty comprehensive, and the inner city streets, so we thought that would be a good idea, bring back some advice that if we can do it, that's the advice we've got, and here's where we're at. So this is not yet finished. I'll go around the room. Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Yes, I have a couple of questions, and they relate to Councillor Courtney's questions as well. I understand that the scope of this round is quite limited because it was the low-hanging fruit, but we've obviously had a lot of submissions beyond what we were looking at, and I just wonder if in the deliberations report you could ensure that they're responded to in terms of the path forward. So particularly around Stancil Ave and Toswell Ave, and some of, I think it was Springley Heights, some of the other roads which we have had submitters identify as them wanting something done. How we're going to progress that in the next round. I guess we're going to have quite a few rounds, but I think some of those ones we could pick up on and begin that thinking and work now. And as you know, I've been worried about Stancil and Toswell for quite a number of years. So thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, just if there is some information that may be helpful from staff or other in regards to accidents, speed's not always the case, but if there's any data showing that speed has been the cause of accidents or what proportion, if it's possible to put a number on. And the other thing is you always unfortunately get clowns who drive irresponsibly, and sometimes that's due to alcohol or drugs. And if there's any sort of data on that, because as much as we put signs and understanding of what's safe speed, generally people drive within the safety of the situation, but you get people I know on some of those streets around our way, they see some clowns on the icy on, and often the police find out they're on something. But if there's any sort of data that comes back.
So you're wanting I suppose
what I'm saying is you make rules, which is great, but unfortunately some real clowns who just abuse it due to their irresponsible behaviour, or there seems to be a growing trend of methamphetamine and other drugs that seems to put people in a state that they just don't care what's going on. So that might be something that needs to be.
Just someone else, you're just wanting someone else on other causes of crashes. And
correct. I mean, we can make the speed limit, halve the speed limit, and will that still reduce people being clowns? And B, how many of those accidents, that unfortunate accidents we do have, both in the CBD or in a fringe area or outer, how many of those are attributable to speed being?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the gentleman who had an accident, I'm not sure how the accident happened, but I couldn't quite work out whether that was someone on the wrong side of a road.
He was driving a car.
Sorry?
Huh? He was driving a car.
Yeah, but driving a car doesn't cause an accident. But how did the accident happen? Did someone cross the road because speed? I mean, you're going 10k an hour or 100k an hour. If there's a solution in the area, is there a blind corner? Or I
suppose the information is that I probably ask the officers if we just have a pie graph with the. Well, even that's because there's usually a combination. It could be speed, alcohol, not wearing a seatbelt, so it makes a minor crash more serious.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not like if my understanding. Yeah, my understanding of crashes is there is a combination of factors.
Correct. So it helps. Basically, it helps me weigh up if us reducing the speed in the CBD or out is going to have a positive effect, or if it's just going to have no effect.
I suppose what you could say is with the crashes in the city, if someone was going at 50k, are going to be hurt a lot more if they're going at 20 or 30k. Doesn't matter what the cause of the crash is, it's the consequence that you're trying to avoid.
True, but one of the submitters was talked about whether she'd be right or wrong that speed wasn't an issue, and if you open a door in front of someone or you that's not good speed.
Yeah, with all due respect to Bernie, I think she looked at the wrong end, because I think what you're looking at is it's the consequences of the crash, not what the cause of the crash was.
No, we know the data will be good. If there's any data, it may be difficult. I understand if it's not difficult on regards to how much it is caused by speed and B, how much it is caused by drugs.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, thanks so much. No other questions or any other information?
Just following up on that, I just wonder if, so the Ministry of Health has obviously got some good data and some good stats around physical safety, but as well as that, we have mental health and wellbeing outcomes in terms of lowering speeds. So I just would really like the deliberations report to explore that, to explore all the benefits of speed lowering in terms of data for physical as well as wellbeing outcomes. And I think one of the things we're just beginning to explore is the impact of noise pollution on our mental health. So how changing speed can decrease noise pollution as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No, it's just extra information to help councillors with their decision making when the appropriate time comes. Okay then, thank you very much for your attendance. We're adjourned. No, we're concluded. Yeah, we're done.